Hey, Get the Pen family. Those who are back and those who are new, welcome. Thank you for being here. If you've subscribed, I appreciate you. If you have yet to, I hope you decide to by the time this video is over. I appreciate likes, shares, and comments, feedback, all of the things. So, as most of you know, I am a hospice chaplain. I've been doing hospice work for 20 years now. Yeah, 2005, and now it's 2025. So, needless to say, over the last 20 years, I have encountered countless situations dealing with end of life hospice patients and their families and the things they go through when a loved one is dying or when with a patient when they are dying. And one of the common threads is usually when someone has gone through a terminal illness, whether it was brief or long and drawn out, it is exhausting. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually exhausting. Being a caregiver to a dying person, it can wear you out in every way. The physical care, having to be off work, having to be present, having to feed, bathe, and toilet a person 24/7 when things get to that point. It is hard work. It is taxing on your mind, your spirit, your faith, everything. And if you've been through that, you know. I don't have to convince or explain to you how difficult, how taxing it can be. So, one of the things that I would hear often from caregivers, and they would share this with a tremendous amount of guilt, is that I will be glad when this is over. They wanted it over because you you wonder how much more you can take when you are pulled and stretched that far. You feel like you can't make it another day. You feel like I can't do this another hour or a minute or a second, let alone another week. And the thing with the dying is you really don't know when it's going to happen. We know the doctors say soon, and based on symptoms and decline, you can figure it's going to be soon, but nobody knows the exact moment that a life will end. So that alone will stress you out just with the anticipation and that anticipatory grief. And just, you're like, it's a cliffhanger. You don't know when, and you're on the edge, and every time the phone rings and when it gets quiet, you don't know if that's the moment. And so some caregivers would say to me, I'll be glad when it's over. But they would have a lot of guilt in saying that because they knew that over meant that their loved one would die. And so they felt like they were wishing death on their loved one, but really all they were wishing for was relief. And the two would go hand in hand, the passing of their loved one, and then would come their relief. But with that relief of caregiving, they would be flooded with grief and a whole nother set of emotions. But long story short, and what I'm trying to get across right now is that going through that process, watching someone suffer, being the caregiver and feeling helpless in a situation as you watch someone struggle, suffer, and deteriorate, you just want it over. You can't take it anymore. It wears you out and you think you're going to lose it and you think you're not even going to survive it. And that brings me to a woman in the Bible who has been vilified, demonized, and spoken ill of in the Bible because she, I believe, says something similar. And remember, these are my opinions, and I've studied the Bible for years, and I've drawn opinions from my biblical studies that may not be popular, and I've kept them to myself for many years, but today I'm going to share some of them with you. Job's wife. Remember, Job lost everything. He lost his job, he lost his business, his children, his property, and even his health. He was dying, he was sick. very, very, very sick. And meanwhile, his wife, we don't even know her name, but she's witnessing all of this. And I would imagine she is probably the primary caregiver. And I'm using my imagination in this situation because all the details are not provided for us. We're only given a limited amount of information. But I'm assuming, just as many other patients that I work with, their spouse may be their primary caregiver. So in this case, I'm going to assume, and for the purpose of my point, I'm going to say his wife was probably his primary caregiver, and she was probably tired. He had sores all over his body. It had to be miserable. And then when your spouse or your loved one is sick and miserable, and you're the caregiver, you take on that misery. You are in it together. You are feeling every bit of that pain, and you might even be feeling more because you feel helpless and you feel abandoned and you don't know what's going to happen. Where is God? Why isn't He doing something to help me? You know, if you know. So, what did she end up saying? She had it up to here, and she said, in the Bible, she said, Job, why don't you just curse God and die? Now, before I go further, let me clear up something. The Bible, and the King James Bible, uses the word curse, but in the Hebrew, that word actually means, it could mean bless. It was used either way. I'm going to give his wife, Job's wife, the benefit of the doubt and say that she said, bless God and die. And she's been vilified because the Bible uses the word curse, and curse is a bad thing. When you curse someone, that's, oh my God. But I don't think she was telling him to curse God and die. I believe she was saying bless God and die because he was suffering. And if you've ever been with someone who was suffering, you almost want them to just go and be at peace. And I believe that's where Job's wife was in their journey through his illness. Just let go, bless God and die, stop suffering, let the suffering go, because she was suffering with him, and she probably felt like she was going to go with him. So to end his misery and suffering after he lost everything, it didn't look like anything would be recouped. It probably didn't look like he was going to get healed. So she says, you know what? Bless God and die. And before we judge her, now in the Bible it says we never heard from her or of her again except for in a historical reference. But just because we never heard from her again doesn't mean God was mad at her. There was just probably nothing else eventful in her life that made it to the Bible. It doesn't mean she was bad. It doesn't mean we need to be mad at her. It doesn't mean well, he did call her foolish, but even if she said bless God and die, maybe he just wasn't ready to die. It just doesn't mean she had ill intent, is what I'm trying to say. She probably meant well, and maybe I'm giving her too much grace. I don't know, but she was tired, and I can relate to that feeling because I remember back in 2002 when my son was sick and he was in Children's Hospital for 3 months and he was not getting better, and it was getting worse and worse, and I was tired, and I got to the point where I was just tired of fighting. I prayed, I laid in the floor, I did everything that I knew to do to bring healing for my son, and when it wasn't happening, I was ready to surrender and say, God, here you go. If you want my baby, you can have him because I'm tired. If you're not going to heal him, Lord, just take him. Let my baby have peace because he's suffering. Just take him. Now, my son, but he was only 2 at the time. If he was a little older, he might have said, Mama, you being a fool. I'm not dying. I don't know. And I'm saying that because we should keep that in mind, because maybe Job wasn't ready to die when he called his wife foolish for saying that. It happens all the time. Caregivers get exhausted. I've seen caregivers stress out to the point that they die before the person that was the hospice patient. So it's a real thing that caregiver stress is hard on your heart, and it can kill you if you don't practice self-care, pace yourself, and recruit some support and use your resources. It can take you out of here. Maybe Joe's wife was at that point. I don't know. We don't know the whole story. But anyway, what I'm trying to illustrate here is maybe she said that because she was tired, suggested that he let go. Maybe he just wasn't ready. I've been there. I was ready to I didn't want to let my son go, but I couldn't imagine continuing day after day watching him suffer. So I said all that to say, why don't we give Job's wife a little bit of grace and just realize that maybe she was tired. Maybe she just thought it would be better and more peaceful for Job to leave his misery by death. But God healed him, restored him. In my case with my son, God healed him and restored him. We don't know. And just because we release someone to die doesn't mean we are killing them. It doesn't mean we're causing their death. It just means we surrender, we give up, we let go, we're done fighting. And then it's in God's hand. It's up to God what he wants to do. Is he going to heal? Is he going to raise them back up? Is he going to restore? Is he going to resurrect? That's a God thing. So remember that when you think about Lot's wife. And she was so vilified. And there are a couple other women, and I could go on with even more women who were just vilified in the Bible. Vashti, remember Vashti? Her husband was drunk with his boys and he wanted her to come down and dance, and she said no. When I put myself in her place, I probably would have done the same thing. Your husband's drunk, they're all drunk. Why would I go down there and dance? What are they going to do with me? I don't want my husband's friends lusting over me. I just don't want it. But Vashti was banished. She was put out. And it was because of her disobedience. And honey, sometimes there's a time to be disobedient. When it's causing you to compromise your morals or your integrity, I might get disobedient. I'm just being honest. If my husband was drunk with his friends and asked me to come dance, I'm going to say no. And I'm going to just have to take my chances on getting put out. And I'm not even going to get into Esther of wanting to step into that role or what she might have been willing to do that Vashti wasn't willing to do. I don't know. And a lot of it, yeah, it's speculation, but the Bible does leave room for speculation because we don't get 100% of the details. So there is so much room for our imagination. Even with Eve, honey, she was just curious. She wanted to know something. She did not have an example before her to know how to live life, how to go about life, how to discern a snake. She was the first woman ever to be. There was no prototype. There was no guidance. There was no mentor to teach her the ways of life, to run from the snake. She didn't know. So she fell for it. I would have fell for it or fallen for it. Excuse my English, my grammar. But I'm saying we need to give some of these people grace that we read about in the Bible before we write them off as evil, saying, that they caused all these problems. We don't know. And we don't know what we would have done if we had been there, if that had been us. And every day we make choices that would have put a bad light on us in the Bible. I'm sure of it. We better be glad that some of our activity isn't recorded in a sacred text. Okay? I don't know who that was for. I don't know who's struggling with letting go. But I pray for grace to let go. And letting go doesn't mean you're giving up. Letting go just means, hey, God, this is in your hands. This is your battle. I'm going to let you fight it. I'm going to let you do your thing. I'm going to bless you and I'm going to step out of the way. I hope you are blessed. I hope this blessed you. This has been the Get the Pen moment. Check out my books on Amazon or visit me at getthepen.net. See ya.